Okay. It is 6:30, and we'll call the Newcastle Planning Board meeting today, January 18th, 2024, to order. Doesn't have it on our agenda, but I just wanted to take a quick carve out minute to do two things. I wanted to welcome Wanda Wilcox to the board. Thank you very much for volunteering. We're happy to have you. Thank you, thank you. And I also wanted to do, I told him privately, but I wanted to acknowledge it publicly. I wanted to say thank you to Peter McNaughton, who has retired from the board. And I thank him for all his years of service and hanging in with us through the code change. And it was really great having you with all that. Having both been through both of those. So, thank you. Why not? Okay. So, thank you to Peter and thank you, Wanda. We are in the process of trying to find a fifth, potentially a sixth and seventh. Ideally, if you could afford the seven, I think that would be good. So, feelers are still out. Okay. Item 2, review of the minutes from November 16th. We have a motion to accept the minutes. Move. Seconded. Thank you. Any discussion, comments about minutes? Other than the fact that they're I just wanted to say that I actually really like the way you do it, the motion, second, votes, result.
Good. Yeah. I'm making changes. So if you see something formatting or that you don't like, let me know. But trying to make it as clear as possible.
Right. It's clear. It also kind of lines up with the comments I heard from the public in the past. So they want to know this.
Yeah.
Seeing no other discussion and knowing one that wasn't here for this one, all those in favor of accepting the minutes from November 16th. Passes 3. One statement.
I'm abstaining. I wasn't here, so I can't tell you how good they are. They look good.
All right, and we have no old business today, but in new business, item 4I. We have a pre-submittal meeting, tax map 003 lot 024 US 1, applicant Midcoast Solar LLC. You guys want to come up? Or want to do? Great. Oh, she's our local friendly reporter.
Okay. I thought that a member of Midcoast would be here.
Okay.
I think they were also planning on being in Zoom, but I just sent them a note saying that's probably not going to happen this time. That's all right. The sketch meeting. So thank you all for inviting us here today. I'm here to talk about a project being proposed by Midcoast Solar, which we're calling Newcastle Solar. It's a 1.55 megawatt DC project. You all received site plans as part of your packet. I will say I've given Michael a new plan, which I can talk a little bit about what changes we made.
Sorry, can you just introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. My name is Sean Murphy. I work for a firm called Flycatcher. I'm the consultant for Midcoast Solar, the applicant for this project.
Great, thank you.
Oh, thank you. So again, I think we presented sort of what the project is off of Route 1. The arrays will be located about 150 feet or so back from Route 1. So there's not more noise on Route 1 for those who are concerned about that. And we follow an existing entrance to get into the property, building a new road for the most of it. We do have the change we've talked about here is before we went sort of as we could now cross the stream rather than going through the wetland because it reduced our wetland impacts. And so we have the Maine DEP has issued a Natural Resources Protection Act permit by rule for this project for this design right here. Recognize if through the process of talking to you, you make changes, we'll go back to them again with a revised one, but I wanted to essentially run that up the flagpole with them before I met with you to make sure that they were accepting our reasoning here.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My brain just, I don't
That's
want to, I
okay.
don't want to interrupt you, but I heard you say 150 feet.
Oh, no, it's 1,500 feet.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes. I'm not sure which I said, but we'll go forward.
Okay.
With that answer. Yeah.
Great. 1,500 feet. I heard 150 and I kind of went, well, no, wait.
No,
I
that's
couldn't
quite,
get my
quite,
bearings.
quite far away. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a significant difference back from the road itself.
Yep.
The nearest residential home is on Route 1, so you can see there's a significant distance as well as trees to sort of bring it back outside the sight line and outside the noise. I know that the planning board, although maybe not the new member, but the planning board has seen solar projects before, so I guess I'm going to rely on you all being somewhat old hands at this and just ask the questions you'd like to ask about.
So thank you.
Yeah.
I'll actually ask Michael if he has any comments or anything you want to say about the project before we.
Sure. So I've gone through, I haven't done a, completely review to see if all the standards were met, but what I've done is gone through to identify at least the reviews that are required and, so I can just tell you what I have found so far. My assumption is that this is going to fall under utility and services use, which the definition is buildings. And actually, let me just quickly ask, did I share this draft finding of facts with
Yeah.
everybody? I think okay. It wasn't in the original package, but I think I followed up.
Right.
Yep.
So the definition for utilities and services, buildings and structures that provide or facilitate the transmission services consumed by the public, including electricity, internet, natural gas, water, and sewer. So so that seems to be the closest use, and it seems like it fit relatively well under that. One question I had, are there any buildings, like actual buildings, not just like structures that are part of this? I don't
No.
think there were. Okay.
No.
So then there's not gonna be any building types, which is fine. So the required reviews that I found is this is gonna require a special use permit because that is what utilities and services require in the rural highway district, which this is in. It would be a large project plan, and I believe it's basically because projects that create significant on or offsite impact is what would qualify for a large project plan. I do have a question as to whether or not the board wants that review to be done by the CEO, or if the board would prefer to just do all of the reviews here. I think special use permit requires planning board review. Large project plan doesn't specifically say one way or the other. I think all the language is that it says the code enforcement officer, but I think there's language in the ordinance that also allows everything to be bundled. So that is a question for you. It is also going to require subdivision review because subdivision review is required for the installation of utility services. In addition, the roads, driveways, and entrance ordinance, specifically entrances, we're gonna have to review it against those standards, which I wanted to ask. It sounds like you mentioned that this is an existing road, or at least an existing entrance to Route 1.
Entrance and
And so I imagine you have a permit or renewal of something from DOT.
I imagine, so I had asked the landowner, but my guess is that this road was put in there for historic reasons before we were even talking about having these sort of permits. And we know that we would need to, we know that we would likely need to submit for a permit to MDOT anyway for change of use.
Okay.
It's being used for timber management now. It'll be used for solar for a period of time. There'll be construction vehicles. And then it's once every quarter or so, a couple of trucks will go up the road, but MDOT will likely want to have some permit for having. I stopped by there today and got the information needed for an MDOT permit, and then I'll call the region office and ask them how they want to handle it.
I figured I just wanted to know what the situation was, if it was a new entrance or it's existing.
No, we'll be
Okay.
using an existing, both of the entrances have both, I should say that we're also talking with the landowner about using another entrance that's already there, already culverted. We'd just be sort of building upon.
Okay. So I think just as long as we get some kind of documentation with the um application, we should be.
Yeah.
Fine. So, all right, and so I just wanted to also go through the additional requirements for this. Pre-submittal meeting, which this is, that's required. Public notice, so for the next meeting, we'll have to do notice in the newspaper and mailed notice, which the mailed notice you'll have to take care of, and I believe we can take care of the newspaper notice.
Let us know what you want us to do and we'll take care of it.
And then we'll have a public hearing at the next meeting. So that is the process. And then in here, I don't believe I shared this with you, but
No.
I certainly can share this list of standards for review so that you can go through and
Mhm.
address anything that's in there. But like I said, special use permit, any additional standards for utilities and services uses, large project plan approval, subdivision approval, which is.
Can I ask about that? I've been doing solar now for like 5 years.
Mm.
I've never done a subdivision before because the lines are typically within the project area, and CMP or Versant just want you to sort of come up to it and connect in, and they want space for their poles. Or often with these smaller projects, we just connect directly to an existing pole. So I'm not against doing it. I just have never heard of it before, and I didn't know if that was something for your local ordinance that was triggering that, or
Yeah, that's what it is. In the local ordinance. So utilities and services, the use utilities and services was just required for subdivision review is required for that.
okay.
I believe, I mean, at least what it says is subdivision review is required for the installation of utility services. My guess is that that's not just, it actually, I had a note to just discuss with the board. My guess is that's not just connecting to utilities, and that is if you're installing something like this, generation or some other kind of this utility facility, that's what that means. And obviously that's kind of up to the board to interpret, but
I would assume, because if someone wants to run 3 or 4 spans into a new house, they don't have to go through subdivision just to have
Right.
CMP run a couple spans.
that's what I figured.
Yeah.
You know, can't really make assumptions when it comes to ordinances. It's, if, you know, I want to just, you all can interpret however makes sense, but I didn't want to assume. So,
You saw that under the,
I believe it's,
well, you know what? We don't have to discuss it. You're
Sure.
running through it. You want to discuss it right now?
if you would like to, that's the only other, let me just say, the only other thing in here are entrance standards, and then
Mhm.
driveway and there's no standards for driveways, so.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you want to look at the subdivision question. Now I think that,
What page is that in the code?
then under the administration,
It's not under the use definition?
no, I don't believe so.
So
I think it's under like the applicability of subdivision.
So that's kind of cool that you picked up on that. But I don't think that's how that was intended. I think well, let's I'm gonna check myself before I say much more here. Let's go read the definition for utilities. Under use, what page?
73
73.
under use standards.
Utilities and services. Oop, I scrolled too far. Yeah, I'm blind. Okay, definition, buildings and structures that provide, facilitate the transmission of services consumed by the public, including electricity, internet, natural gas, water, and sewage. Buildings and structures that provide, facilitate the transmission of services consumed by the public, including electricity, internet, natural gas. Okay, and then the subdivision was on page 80. It's item 12, article 7, item 12, B6, installation of utility services. I think that what
No, that's not entirely clear, right? The
not
installation,
entirely
but
clear, but I think the in this here, what we're talking about is the installation of utility services for the subdivision.
mm,
I think that's the intention, like if you're gonna install, as we've all
sewer
seen,
and water.
sewer, water, or buried electrical, or even electricity before the subdivision is built out or whatever. That's how I interpret this, because it doesn't,
Yeah, there's no subdivision here releasing the land. We will submit a decommissioning plan when the project has reached end of life. We'll remove everything. Potentially the road, if that's determined to be a beneficial use and you and the DEP agree on that, but otherwise. There's no legal subdivision occurring. It will do what you want us to do. I want to be very clear about that, but. I don't want to add more work if you don't have to do it.
understandable.
If this doesn't have to go through subdivision review, it saves me a lot of work. But I want to make sure that if it has to go through subdivision review, or if it's supposed to go through subdivision review,
Well, so let's just think about it for a quick second, because we're not talking about building types at all. What we're really trying to capture is erosion, sediment control, stormwater management, floodplain, things like that. Those are going to be captured on the large project plan anyway. So the duplication of effort seems kind of ridiculous, since those are the only criteria that we're going to be reviewing if we push it through subdivision. So to just make the applicant fill out a bunch of forms for
Wow.
those three things that they're going to have to do,
yeah.
Anyway.
Answer a bunch of questions, right?
it seems a little redundant to me.
I would also say, and this is maybe kind of a larger issue, so I think the general intention of subdivision, especially the kind of result, which is that you end up with a plan that gets recorded with the county,
Mhm.
is to make sure that you know where lot lines are and the intensity of development,
Mhm.
and that if anybody wants to, if someone wants to add to it, they've got to come back. This isn't that. This isn't creating more dwelling units. This isn't
Well, it's not
creating new
even,
lots.
it's not even dividing the lot in
Right.
any way.
It's right. It doesn't, well, I guess my job, I didn't go through the saying what makes sense. I just went through to be like, here's
Yeah.
the information. So
No, it's good.
if that's the decision of the board, is that this subdivision's not applicable?
I would just go ahead and real quick, make it official, make a motion that that subdivision for this utility application is not applicable. Subdivision review, not necessary. However you want to phrase it.
Yeah, I guess I would say.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? There you go. 4-0. Let's just follow that up with a note on 12B6 to clarify that in the future. for
Okay.
What we're actually talking
Yeah. Maybe we can wordsmith and figure out how to amend that
about. That's a good catch, but
later, but
let's fix it. So we're clear.
So I'm smiling. I'm on the Portland Planning Board and this is so much smoother than what we see there. So thank you.
That's right. You mentioned that, so.
There would be a lot more emails flying back and forth in that situation. So,
We try to make it easy.
yeah.
Okay. So that kind of derailed you from your things you were bringing up.
No, I think unless the board wants to go through all of the standards or any of the standards. I don't, actually, let me look at this. I made notes, so they didn't show them what I printed. So okay, so there's no buildings that are part of this. Do we want, do you all want the large project plan to be, do you want the review to be kind of bundled, or would you like the code enforcement officer to do large project plan review and planning board to do the special use permit?
Let's go read. Large project plan is on page 79, right-hand side of the page. Article 7, section 11, large project plan. I'm trying to find, okay, it's C authority, item C authority. Number 1, the code enforcement officer reviews and approves applications that require large project plan approval. 2, upon approval of large project plan, the code enforcement officer issues a zoning permit to the applicant. 3, the code enforcement officer may, upon consideration of the complexity of the application, forward the application to the planning board for review and approval at a public hearing. Hold that for a quick second and go read special permit, which is on page 86. That would be Article 7, Section 18, special permit. I'll read applicability and authority. So B, applicability. Special permits may only be requested as specifically authorized by this code. No zoning permit must be issued for development that requires or requests a special permit until the discretionary review process for a special permit has been completed in accordance with the standard of this article. 3, the approval or denial of an application or a special permit is in the reasonable discretion of the planning board. And then under authority, the planning board reviews and decides all applications that require a special permit. 2, the granting of a special permit authorizes the code enforcement officer to issue a zoning permit. So, yeah, there's a little bit of a,
And on the district standards pages, special permit is planning board.
yes.
So, I mean, doesn't, the way that my reading and understanding of this is basically, there's different things, like the planning board could approve, or it would review the special use permit, code enforcement officer can approve the large project plan. It doesn't, the next question is going to be who should approve the roads, driveways, and entrances.
That's the code enforcement officer unless he requests the planning board
The
review.
roads, driveway, okay. So I don't think it says, it didn't say one way or the
Yeah, it
other,
says
but
reviewing authority. So I think that unless, I think it's pretty clear that the permit for the use has to go through planning board. The zoning permit has to go through large project, which is the CEO. So unless the CEO wants us to do both, we'll default to that.
Okay.
I think that's the plain reading of the.
I
So
think that makes sense.
are you against us requesting that the code enforcement officer send this to you all? It just feels like a project, like solar projects have a mixed bag of public sentiment about them. And the idea that parts of this project would be approved by a single city official and parts would be approved by a appointed board that has a public hearing process. It feels like we're asking for someone to raise their hand and say, that's not how you should have done it. So I don't want to ask for it if you guys are going to just be mad at me for doing it. But on the other hand, it does feel like the more public the process can be, the easier it moves. People can sort of understand what happened.
Yeah, I think that's great. Honestly, I applaud that. There's nothing we have in the code that allows an applicant to request that sort of change of authority review. So
Yeah.
with a letter from the applicant to the CEO, he would take it under advisement,
Of course.
and I would recommend that, absolutely. It doesn't anger me. Totally fine.
That's sort of what I was getting at too, is like, I don't think that the planning board can take it, that review from code enforcement officer, but if it was something that you all felt, I think if you asked nicely, I think George would be more than happy to. He probably would work with everybody. So I think we can, sounds like it's going that direction, but
Right.
And of course, it's George's discretion as to how he wants to address it.
And if he wants us to do all of it, including the roads, driveways and entrances, he can note that as well.
And I do want to say, I can understand the logic of having the uses be kind of the planning board's purview and saying, is this use allowed and does it meet that? And having the small, well, actually even small, and there's not really standards, I don't think, under small, medium and large or small and large project plans. So it can kind of make sense that you need to meet those requirements anyway. And if it's an administrative kind of review of like, yes, you meet all the requirements, no, you don't. It shouldn't, ideally, it doesn't matter who's reviewing them, all the standards can be met. And I think the use is more the sensitive thing. But that's just kind of a larger kind of zoning code logic thing. So
I think so. Can I, if I could just read the statement of purpose under special permit? I don't know if that would help, but I'm going to read it anyway. Item 1, there's only one, to authorize a predetermined type of exception from the standards of this code within specific limitations and subject to performance measures. So I think the number of times that a use or anything is called or flagged for review as a special permit is very minimal. I mean, there's only a few times that's employed as it should be.
why it's so
Specific,
special.
what?
So
See,
it's
that's why it's special, exactly, right. It's not an everyday thing. And it's specifically to do something that's sort of a deviation from, because, we don't have solar projects or utilities on every lot like we do houses.
So yeah, especially like utility scale.
Does that make sense?
So
Yeah, I think that's totally fine.
it's, what kind of excavating, grading, and any kind of other site work are you planning on doing on this?
So, I mean, the site itself is sort of in an upper area. You can sort of see in the topo map, so we're gonna have to sort of, the arrays will, by the manufacturer's performance guarantees will be based on having them at no more than certain slopes. So we'll need to sort of do the earthwork around within there to get those certain slopes. The road is by and large, the reason we pick this road here rather than sort of trying to avoid the wetlands and stream completely is that if you look at the maps heading out to the west, it's just steep slope. There'd be a lot of earthwork being done here. This is essentially going up a hill and then it's mostly level through that area right there. So
Are you
there'll be
expecting, like,
some.
blasting, or is it mostly dirt moving?
It's mostly dirt. At this point, we haven't done the geotechnical. I don't know if we'll need a blasting permit for it. Not expecting so, given the just the type of soils we see in and around this area and the things they're able to do these days. But and I don't. There's nothing that makes me think that there's ledge right there. People.
That's I don't have too many, I don't really have any other questions for the applicant. There's, like I said, I'll share, there's maybe 3 or 4 pages, 5 pages of standards. Actually, now that we got rid of subdivision, I'll probably go down to 2. But I'll send that over and that way you can focus your responses.
So the other solar application we had a couple years ago, the things we ended up talking about were the fence, the road, the fence, access to the site for emergency vehicles should there need arise. And what else did we talk about? Setbacks, which are well covered.
You know what we talked about on the phone, but was the issue of capacity on the lines and I guess what there was, and I don't know all the details, but I believe it was you and there was discussion at some point about purchasing CMP rights. From the conversation we had, you understand this much better than I do, but I was just wondering if you had any information on that about like, is there, if you build this, can CMP or will they have to accept the capacity, accept the power? I don't know how all that works, but I know there was an issue at some point.
Well, thank you for wearing your clothing today. That's super helpful.
Hey, yeah, there
I
you
don't
go.
say anything highly controversial.
Logo there. There's no conflict here.
No, I mean, so
joke.
the way it works is nobody builds solar without doing system studies, or at least initial studies to determine whether or not there's capacity in the line to accept the power. What you may have heard is there's a lot of solar projects that have experienced delays as just because there's capacity doesn't mean that CMP doesn't need, and Versant as well, doesn't need to review how they're going to handle that power into their system. Some of these studies can take like extended periods and there's a priority system there that can be shifting around at any one particular time. This project right here is at or around 1 megawatt AC, so it falls below the thresholds of a lot of the more complicated projects that have had delays in terms of getting their system studies done. And that's somewhat specifically done to sort of just get the power out there and when sort of where it's needed. Did I say anything wrong?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there was a resident at the time. One of the concerns was that the permit was being sought from the town to be used as leverage for some grant program or something like that. And the concern was that it was going to be locked up and never used, never really intended to be built, in other words. And
So there's a
the-
queue.
Yeah.
New England has a queue, and if you look at that queue, there are a number of projects that have been on there for some of them for as long as I've been consulting, which has been a very long time in the state of Maine. So that's just how it works. And every now and then, ISO New England will go through and contact them and say, "Do you still need this?" And if they say yes, then that's kind of how it works. In most cases, what happens is there's capacity on there. The studies that are done are designed to sort of find out, like, is this a real project or isn't? Can we put this on? So I can't imagine I can't see the economic upside of permitting a project. I mean, as soon as you put it on the queue, you've reserved the power. You don't need to spend money for a consultant to come in and talk to you all about these things and do the engineering design for it if that's your goal. I can't see what that goal would be, but I'm not a developer.
Hey, that's it.
Maybe I just want to. Okay, no, we are going to have to do the public notice and public hearing for the special use permit. So that isn't going to change. I just wanted to make sure since it's not going to be something. But basically it's going to move forward as the
Great.
process is going to continue as
Yeah.
expected.
So we'll coordinate with you on what the notice to the neighbors to say.
Yeah.
Um,
Usually what I do is I'll just share whatever language I'm going to send to the newspaper and you can just send that to the neighbors.
we also include contact information for, in case somebody has a question, they can ask us.
Great.
Okay, well, I'm gonna be done.
That's a long
Good
one.
luck.
Sorry, I was waiting for the. Yep. No, I think we're all set. Just as a matter of, formality, do I have to open up a public hearing on this right now?
No, this isn't a public hearing.
No, I didn't think so. It was on the agenda. I saw it and I thought, no, I don't think we actually.
I got public comment down there.
Public comment. Thank you. That's what it is. Okay, so do we have any public comment regarding the pre-submittal meeting for this project? Great. All right, seeing none, I think we'll close this one out. Thank you both
Thanks.
very much for coming.
See you in a month.
We'll see you in a month. Wonderful. Other business. Shoreland zoning draft amendments.
Yeah.
So, can we just outline real quick the process we're gonna go through with this? And I only say that because, I do feel like it's a little unnecessary to regurgitate literally all of it now, since we're going to have to regurgitate all of it at least a couple more times.
Sure.
So maybe we could,
That's that's why I provided this memo. So
exactly.
I'm happy to basically explain anything.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple things that I want to get the board's direction on.
Oh, thanks. Have a great night.
And then also this is just an opportunity, if there's anything that seems like you don't want done.
Right.
Happy to hear, but I don't have to go through, we don't need to go through all of this
Okay.
right now. If you don't want, I'm happy.
Well, I'm kind of putting it out as a bit of a question before we dive in, because the process moving forward, let's just outline it real quick, is gonna be that we, the planning board, would say here at some point, either tonight or at a future meeting, okay, we're happy with this draft. We're going to recommend that the select board put it on a warrant. That's a recommendation. When they take up that recommendation, and they have to within 30 days or something like that, they have to make a decision whether they're going to put it on a warrant or not. That'll set the timetable on when public hearings would have to happen based on when they're going to put it on the warrant. Because it is a ordinance change to a land use ordinance by law, the planning board has to hold a public hearing on it. The select board, I believe, can optionally hold a public hearing on it. They're not required to.
I think that's right.
And then there would be a vote at a special or annual town meeting. So at a bare minimum, we, the planning board, along with the town planner, would present this to the public twice. Potentially 3 times. That's true of like any change, so.
Mhm.
Just want to put that out there.
Uh,
I like
Yeah.
the memo you did.
So yeah, well, right. This won't be the last time that you all see it. I'm gonna try and provide. Okay.
Are they just testing the?
Exercise.
It's a monthly maintenance night. It got postponed because of the storm on Tuesday.
Uh,
So they moved their maintenance night till tonight.
gotcha.
Good.
It's all good.
And also, I'm trying to put together memos in light of the last the special town meeting where I had to explain, and sometimes I am not the most eloquent. So this also ahead of time will allow the public to like read this, understand generally, get a primer on what we're talking about here. So if there's anything that's not clear to you all, let me know, because then I will try and clarify it for the public.
Great.
Do you want to get into any of it? I can tell you the allowed uses and districts are the thing that, like, I just put some proposals in here.
Mhm.
If it's all good with you, then that's great.
Well, those are the things we probably should walk through. I have a couple
Okay.
questions and comments about districts and then about a couple other things, but and I like the organization. Overall, I guess what I'd like to start by saying is that I kind of can't believe that somehow the cut and paste job that someone did on our existing shoreline zoning left out so much of the administration. I don't know if you guys, the amount of stuff that's in, is it the blue or the purple?
It's the
colors?
purple,
The
yeah.
purple color. I just couldn't wrap my head around the fact that we don't have that at the moment, even though we have to enforce it that way. It's just not there. Where is that? What's that one called? Draft? What's that called? Draft shoreline.
Yeah.
Draft shoreline ordinance amendments. Yeah, the purple. So yeah, I was kind of blown away. You had a question, or maybe it was just a comment about organization.
Yeah, I mean, I reorganized everything. I tried to, like, group it into 3 sections because the way shoreline zone, the kind of model ordinances, there's administration in the beginning, there's administration at the end, there's kind of the standards that need to be met are, I think it's like section 15. It's like, can we just put these all in one section? So it just, I mean, for me, I use ordinances more than the average person, and I just thought this doesn't make my life easier, and I'm hoping it makes it clear for anybody else who has to use it too.
Well, I honestly, I really appreciated it. It read the way I expected it to read, instead of, it always annoyed the crap out of me that you'd start reading shoreline and like the second page would be about nonconformance.
Mhm.
And you'd be like, why am I reading about nonconformity on the second page?
Yeah.
When I don't even know what we're talking about yet?
I don't know what conforming is. Yeah.
So annoying.
Yeah. So I tried to do that. I will say the section 3 land use standards, or article 3, I guess maybe is what I call it. It's all in the exact same order as the state's model shoreline zoning. So if they change anything, we need to update it. It shouldn't be that difficult to go through and say, okay, this paragraph, you can go through. For the most part, I think I just took one chunk that was towards the end and moved it up to towards the beginning. And other than that, the organization is pretty much the same. Yeah. Good. Well, if it makes sense to you, then that is happy.
Well, it made sense to me. That's just my opinion. I enjoyed it. Did you read the whole thing?
I
You'll
did
read it.
not read the whole.
That's
thing.
fine. You're gonna get plenty of opportunity to do that.
It was like, I didn't know how much I needed to read, so I glanced at it, but that's about all I did.
Yeah, and then I just tried to track whatever the other changes were, and some of them are like ordinance. It changed from chapter throughout. It kind of shows up a bunch of times, but it's like that's a minor change. So,
Right. I think, I don't want to override you, but I think most of the comments I was getting from what I read from you in the memo and the changes in here really centered around the establishment of districts, the changes that were done about that. So we line up with the core zoning code. And then the question of what is the village center district,
Mhm.
sort of like in concept.
Yeah.
And what are the uses that are appropriate there?
Right.
And because those were where most of the changes were that you were
That's-
sort of proposing, right?
yeah, the timber harvesting is the other thing, which. And Damerscott does it the way that is proposed in here, which is basically we already follow the state standards, so why not let the state administer it?
Right.
That's how they do it. That's how the proposal is. Right now, we follow the state standards, but it falls on George to administer, which
Right.
is just kind of more work for George.
Let me just bring Wanda up to speed real quick on that. The one major change is, that we're trying to bring the shoreline zoning ordinance up to date with the state's recommended model ordinance called Chapter 1000.
And that's what we talked about way back when we
Way-
finished it, when we was finishing up the code.
Yes.
Knowing that this was the
It's
next,
coming.
it was coming and that we wanted to follow the
Right.
state.
In that, one of the big changes they made was they gave municipalities 3 or 4 options. Was it 4
I
options?
think it's 3.
3 options
Yeah, I read your 3 options.
about timber harvesting specifically. And essentially it's like, let the state do it all, maintain some control, maintain all control. And we had decided to let the state just do it.
That's good.
A lot easier on everybody involved.
There is one question that I want to get clarification on from the state, which is if we basically kick it up to the state, can we prohibit timber harvesting in a district if we want to, if the town wants to? Because essentially what we're saying is timber harvesting is allowed anywhere. We would end up taking timber harvesting off of the land use table. So it would be allowed anywhere that the code would allow it, basically.
Shoreline.
The shoreline code. Yeah, I'm sorry, the shoreland ordinance allows it. And so what I want to clarify with the state is, can we leave it in here to say where timber harvesting is allowed in the shoreland? And if they say no, then could we regulate where timber harvesting is allowed through the core zoning?
In
As-
shoreline.
No, as a use, like could we
Well,
say,
as a use, as a general use outside of shoreland, of course we could.
that's my thinking. I just want to
Yeah,
be clear
absolutely.
that that's the case.
But inside of shoreland, I think what we're all saying is the state already does it sort of
They-
by
they manage
default.
it, yeah.
Yes, they manage it by
They
default.
have very clear standards.
Very clear. And anytime there's even a question or a problem, it gets kicked up and they come in and they have the overriding authority on it anyway. So why duplicate the effort is the thinking.
Yeah.
So within the shoreland, give it to them.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying they should administer all of it.
Yeah.
But I think what I want to be clear about is the shoreline zoning right now, I think we could essentially say no across the board, no timber harvesting anywhere in shoreland. If we wanted, we could, any district we want, I think. That would seem to follow we're allowed to be more strict,
Yeah,
but not less
right.
strict than the
Right.
state's model ordinance.
Yeah.
But their guidance on letting the state administer it basically says, take it off of your land use table. Which essentially means it's allowed everywhere
In the
according
shoreline.
to, in the shoreline zoning, according to their standards.
Right.
So right now, like if our or zoning, because this is just like an overlay, right? So if we say in the, I don't know, rural district, shoreline zoning is not allowed, in the rural district, timber harvesting is not allowed, then it doesn't really matter what it says in the in the shoreland zone, in the shoreland ordinance, because it might be allowed under shoreline zoning, but if it's not allowed under our zoning, then can't do it.
Anyway, this,
So that's an interesting question you need to ask them.
That's what
Because
want to clarify.
I would wager good money that they're gonna say, doesn't matter what regulations you put in, our laws override your laws.
so if they allow it, we can't prevent it.
Unless we specifically prevent it in the shoreline zone.
We can, so we.
This is just
can-
my guess.
So it sounds like you're saying the town can only regulate it in shoreland zone. Because the state doesn't prohibit it outside of shoreland. Right?
No, the town could regulate timber harvesting outside of shore,
Right. So we, could-
all on our own.
so the town could say in this district, it's not permitted.
Yes, we could.
The fact that there is some shoreline in that district, but not all shoreline. That part of it, which is shoreland, is still covered by that ordinance.
And my argument,
But-
and I want clarification on this.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is what you're saying.
Yeah.
My guess would be, well, you can say whatever you want about outside of shoreline, but because shoreline exists as an overlay.
Mhm.
our rules
So-
supersede your rules,
In the shoreline.
just in the shoreline,
But unless we want to be more strict.
unless we want to be more strict. But then we would have specifically have to do it in the shoreline ordinance. Because that's where it gives us the authority to do it. It doesn't give us. We do not have the authority, my understanding is, to create laws outside of the shoreline ordinance that restricts the shoreline ordinance. Unless it's within the shoreline zone ordinance, like it says specifically,
Yeah.
you can make it more restrictive inside this ordinance,
Yeah.
but an
Well-
outside ordinance can't.
But we
In-
also don't have to
effective.
have a separate shoreline ordinance. There's some communities that have just kind of mashed them together and they regulate, they meet all of the standards of shoreline
Sure.
zoning through their own ordinance and it's just one.
Well, there's one particular one that I'm thinking of in Lincoln County that only has shoreline.
Yeah.
That's literally all they have.
So either way, I'm gonna find out about that. I don't know if it's an issue. Maybe nobody here is worried about timber harvesting. Anywhere, in Newcastle, which it hasn't really become, I haven't heard of any real issues. But I'm gonna find out from the state and then we can make a decision. of what does the town want to do with it?
I think we should, if we're concerned about it, we run it on parallel parallel but separate tracks.
Yeah.
Right? Concerned about timber harvesting outside of the shoreline, we worry about that through the core zoning code. We let the state manage timber harvesting through the shoreline. And get the answer.
That's, yeah. I want to do whatever's the most simple, but I also want to know, part of the fun of shoreline zoning is finding out where shoreline zoning is finding out where the boundaries are of like, well, how loose can we be on this and how restrictive can we be on this, right? Or the state says.
Yeah.
So that's timber harvesting. The districts and zoning map, I moved a couple things just so that the land use table and the listing of the order of things in the ordinance line up.
Yep.
The two big things are currently there's a general development GD and a village center VC district on the Newcastle land use table, the one that's existing. They don't exist. They don't show up anywhere and they're in the ordinance. They are described generally. Uses are identified as permitted or not, or who can approve them. They do not show up on the shoreline zoning map, which essentially means they don't actually exist anymore. So if something were only allowed in the VC district, can't do it.
Is shoreland one of the ones that says the map is the rule?
Okay.
I think so, but it's not as though there's boundaries defined in the ordinance either. You know, sometimes they'll identify what the boundaries are and they'll show it on the map.
Yeah.
They're not identified here. I don't think boundaries are identified through here. I think it's just
The map.
it's what's on the map.
Okay, so map is the rule.
Yeah. So I say that like we've got uses that are allowed in GD and VC, but they don't exist. So my suggestion is get rid of the GD and keep the VC district. It won't actually exist still. We have to amend the shoreline zoning map, which I'm trying to figure out how to do now. In theory, it's easy, but in practice, I'm not just going to draw on a map. So, I don't know how much detail we want to go into. The GD district is a optional district. All of the districts in shoreline are kind of optional, except for resource protection and stream protection. The state kind of tells you like, here's the resources that you must protect, and streams are where they are, and you can't really move them. All the other ones are basically like, use these as appropriate. GD is the most like intensive, it's general development, it's the most intensive development district that shoreland allows. So currently, it's not located anywhere. My guess and what it looks like is that the VC district is essentially a general development district. It's a version of it. They tightened it up. There's some things that actually match the MA, the marine area, marine activities, maritime activities district. So this is one of those issues of like, where's the boundary on this? How kind of intensive are we allowed to permit development to be in a general development? Only real reason that I even bring it up is because looking at the comprehensive plan, the conversations, the code, the downtown seems like it doesn't fit very well within, especially a lot of it falls within the shoreline district. Shoreline district. That the VC would be a more appropriate district to have the downtown in, and the things that are allowed in the core zoning code would just be a little bit more consistent. So that's why I'm saying I think my recommendation is to keep VC, get rid of GD, and then update VC as desired by the community and you all to be as close to the
What
D6
core zoning code
D5
permits,
core zoning
exactly.
code permits.
Yeah.
And I just need to check, but I currently the Newcastle ordinance, as far as density is concerned, it points to the core zoning code in terms of what densities you're allowed to do in the downtown. So because it's on sewer and water is my guess. It doesn't actually say that, but it says here, I just want to note, the village business district D5 and town center D6 district standards in Article 2 of the Newcastle Core Zoning Code provide for greater residential densities in those areas served by municipal water and sewer. In those districts, those standards shall apply. That exists right now. It points to old zoning districts from the last land use ordinance, so we just need to update that. But basically, it's saying you can have the densities that the core zoning code allows because you've got sewer. So again, that's why I think that this VC district should be utilized.
I think it makes perfect sense to put D5 and D6 in the village center district of the shoreline zone and update it as accordingly, like you say. I mean, that makes perfect sense. It brings everything into a lot better alignment.
I think it makes sense. Because there's so many things, I gave you one table that is the chapter 1000 baseline. I gave you another one that shows what the current zoning district, what the current uses are, and I tried to highlight where they are different, which is what this little table off to the side is. With the X's means that they're not the same. And then I tried to give you another table that shows what is proposed and how that compares with the chapter 1000 state baseline and the current zoning code, because I think that's the only way that you can make sense of it. So
yeah. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it all looked, your proposals all looked great to me, honestly. The only question that I have actually really pertains to the Maritime Activities District, because as districts go, I think you handled the Village Center District conundrum quite well. But the fact that the Marine Activities District is literally one parcel,
yes,
to me is a problem. And I was intrigued by your proposal to maybe have two marine activities districts, one for working waterfronts activities, fishing and boat building and things like that, and another for recreational type marine activity uses.
Because right now we just
Marinas.
have the boatyard.
We literally have the boatyard, which means that technically no other marine activities are allowed on the river in Newcastle, and that seems ludicrous to me. It really does.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see that discussed. and a change proposed that allows more marine activity uses.
Yeah, I remember wondering about that when we were working on this before, and like, because districts are by lot,
Mhm.
it's like, okay, so which lot do you designate now as, no, now you're marine?
Well,
You know, I mean,
it could be an
was-
overlay.
It was. Did it, how's that? Do we have any other overlays?
Well, all
On
of
shoreline
shoreland
area.
essentially is an overlay where you have to meet the standards of the core zoning code
Mhm.
and whatever the overlay is. So usually you have to meet whichever one is more,
Whichever is more
strict.
stringent, yeah.
uh, but if a use isn't allowed in the shoreland zone, even if it's allowed in the core zoning code, you can't do it if you're in the shoreland zone. So
So imagine
Yeah,
you've
so-
got the parcel of land which extends ideally further back from the river than the
Depth.
depth of the
Dedicated.
shoreland zone.
Sure.
So the shoreland zone just sort of follows the contour,
feet
right,
or whatever.
right.
Yeah.
and so the rest of the parcel behind that line is governed strictly by the core zoning code, and the parcel within the shoreline is governed by both. So there's no reason I think that we couldn't just
Overlay, which is like all the way down. the
exactly
river.
have an overlay of marine districts along the shoreline that sort of allow for greater marine activity uses.
Hmm.
And I don't know if anybody else is even interested in it, but I would say that that is something we should have a public hearing about.
So you would then. I don't know exactly what the differences are. Now, you could do marine district things in that portion of the lot, but not outside of that portion of the lot.
Yeah.
It's sort of the opposite of shoreline restriction. You can't do these things within this, but you can farther back. You can only do them within.
Yeah.
So, many feet.
Yeah, I mean, an example that comes to mind obviously is we have the Dodge Point Preserve along that section of river. We might say we don't want any marine activity uses
Specifically there.
on that
Well,
section of the river.
It's currently conservation.
It's part of the conservation, right? So it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense necessarily to say, oh yeah, go ahead and put a
Conservation, but you can have a wash pit for boats here.
right, exactly, a marina. But in other places along the river, it might make sense to say that those uses are allowable.
Well, you might have somebody who wants to pop up and rent boats and rent kayaks and who knows what.
Right.
A shipyard,
It's a recreation.
but it's recreational.
We had,
Is that, yeah, is that currently prohibited?
yes,
You can't rent kayaks in the rural.
not if it's within shoreline. We don't have anything that allows you to do that.
What is it about? So you can't have a business renting kayaks if you do it within sight of the water, within some distance of the water. But you can farther back from the water. There's nothing for, I don't, yeah. It's another
there's
whole
like,
discussion.
there are some,
You can rent kayaks 500 feet away from the water, but you can't put them in.
well, so
You
you,
go
Well,
to Damascotta.
Are you prohibited from putting kayaks in the water?
Not in Damascotta, you do it in Damascotta.
Are you prohibited in Newcastle? I don't know.
so
How are you gonna-
marinas are allowed in marinas as a
your own.
use currently are allowed in all of the districts except for the resource protection.
Wait, where's that? Where are you
On
looking
the,
here?
on the, I'm on the current land use table.
Land use, LUT current.
Yeah.
What line is that?
That is 28.
Marina.
Rural D1 marina is just required, special permit required. It's not prohibited.
Planning board.
Yeah, another. I might regret saying, but another exercise we could go through is to basically go through the core zoning code, all of the uses that are permitted by district, kind of cross that with the shoreland zone
versus those that are
districts
prevented.
and say like, okay, where is it? Where are things are allowed in one and not allowed in the other?
Right.
And try and get them as close to as possible to each other.
How much work do you want to do?
I know that's why I said I might regret saying this, but
Sounds great. Get right on that.
yeah,
I mean, but how else are you gonna line them up?
That-
appropriately,
Yeah,
right?
and so not to get off on another tangent, but there's land, the shoreline zone. One of the things that is frustrating about it is there are uses in here that aren't really uses, like signs. Not a use.
Not a use.
Um, what was it? They're filling and earth moving of more or less than 10 cubic yards, right? It's like, it's not a use,
Right.
but it's on the use table. So there's things where it's like, it's prohibited in this area, but it's not a use, and it just kind of doesn't line up very well. But I think as far as the marine activities or maritime activities, when I think the reason that the state had that was to kind of to create a district that was within the shoreland that kind of you don't have housing in, but allows like working waterfronts essentially, because all of the others really, the big thing is they regulate how dense housing. So I think that they wanted to create something that's like, yes, this might be a desirable location to put a house and to live, but we don't want you to do that. We don't want, I mean, if you think about Portland's waterfront, like condos started popping up and they were like, no, I don't know if this is a reaction to Portland's, but this is a solution to it of saying either you can only have so much housing in the working waterfront, or this amount has to be working waterfront. No housing's allowed. So it says maritime activities, but there's definitely like plenty of water dependent activities that are allowed in even the like limited residential or limited commercial. So don't let the names of the districts fool you.
Right.
because
Well,
you can call them whatever you want.
sure. But just going back, it's always really bugged me on that same land use table, current item 33, 34, and 35. Those just kind of tick me off, to be honest with you. Love to see them gone.
I mean,
There's no need for them.
we can, I think, get rid of them. I feel like that's what they're saying. What it says here is like, we got close, but we didn't quite get it. So we're just gonna,
Oh, no, I mean, yes, but I read it as an excuse for, it's an out for the planning board to not have to say no.
we can allow anything.
Yeah, we can allow anything. That's,
Similar.
yeah.
it's a use similar to an allowed use. I'm sorry, what the hell?
So depending on who you are, you maybe can get it or not.
I think that's exactly.
Yeah.
So the way we handle it in the core zoning code is to say that the, can't remember if it's the CEO or planning department or whatever, must classify.
right. That's
If it's a use that is not listed, it must be classified as a use,
It's one of the uses.
as
it
one of the
isn't.
uses that already exists.
Mhm.
Or there's a procedure there, and this is lazy in my opinion. This use is similar to allowed uses,
And all other.
so why bother?
that's yeah. I try to do that with the solar application. That's why I wanted to say what use is this? Is this utility and services, or is it gonna be something else? Because then how else are you gonna, there's different standards that they have to meet or not be allowed. So
Kind
Uh,
of job description that says and all other duties as assigned.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, really,
Yep.
so do you want me to try and address that in the
I mean-
following draft?
I would. I don't know how the rest of y'all feel.
Yeah,
So
So, I mean, I guess the general question I have about the districts in the general question I have about the districts is, should we be holding a public hearing to discuss the districts? And if so, at what point? We know that we're going to have to redraw a map. At some point. Do we draft a proposed map change that shows the districts and then have a public hearing and then maybe change the map again based on the feedback from that public hearing? Or do we, you see what I'm saying? Like procedurally, I guess I'm asking, how do we get this question before the public without the first time they're seeing it is when they're potentially being asked to vote on it?
That's, I'm just looking at any changes, because with the village center district, any changes that happen now don't go into effect until the map is amended,
Of course.
you know. So my thinking was, if we change it now or we change it, we can revisit it and update this again when we change the shoreline. So if more changes want to be made. So what I'm just looking to see is the only changes that I proposed in here that are outside of that basically would actually go into effect if this was adopted are in the stream protection, 1 and 2 family residential, including driveways, commercial, and small non-residential facilities for educational, scientific, or nature interpretation. And I basically said that those aren't allowed. And the reason that those wouldn't be allowed is the stream protection district is only 75 feet from, and you're not allowed to build within 75 feet. So it creates, there was a weird loophole that was basically like, oh, you can build within 75 feet, which you're not supposed to do if you come to the planning board and there's nowhere else that's reasonable. But if there's nowhere else that's reasonable, it's like you shouldn't. So basically the buffer creates this weird cycle of like, well, if you're outside of 75 feet, you're outside of stream protection. So why, then you can do whatever you want out there. It's not so that's why I said no, just to be like, look, let's not even have those conversations. But that's up. So
I'm with you on that one, but it just occurred to me that you're talking about it like we're going to propose the language changes to the ordinance. And after they're adopted, potentially adopted, voted in, update the map.
I mean, that can happen.
Yeah, so I was actually proposing that we do them at the same time.
Yeah,
But since, at least from my perspective, since the map is the rule, the map is the visual cue that I think a lot of people can point to gain understanding about how shoreline works. We should have that map ahead of public hearings. That's my opinion.
So, because I haven't been here and haven't been part of this, so the change in the district names and the change in the district is all driven by the shoreline. Is that what I'm hearing?
But yeah, by the new
I mean,
model.
we're not throwing up all the districts. And
No,
changing
no,
stuff.
not at all.
It's got to do with mostly the shorelines and how that all falls.
Yeah, and it also just is cleaning up our old ordinance. Because as Michael was saying at the beginning, two of them, two districts that were described
Oh.
in our old shoreline didn't appear on them.
Gotcha.
And that's a problem.
Gotcha.
Yeah, this also like
So it's just aligning the two
Bringing it all.
all together. Gotcha.
Exactly.
and
Now I got you.
Yep.
even like the whole reason that we picked up shoreline zoning to address was because the state came back and said, oh, this purple stuff's missing. Fix your zoning, shoreline zoning ordinance. And I was like, all right, well, if we're gonna go do this, like I started seeing all these other things that were wrong. And so then it just kind of kept pulling at that string. So this was intended to be mostly administrative, which I think is why there's even a question of like, should we update the map now or later? Because most of it was like, it's not going to change anything that's on the map, but I think we've gotten to a point where there are changes to the map that would be that would make sense to happen here, so. If that's your desire to get the map updated or, proposed updates to the map to go along with the proposed changes here, that makes
I mean, Shoreland,
sense.
yeah, Shoreland's big enough, that I'd love to see our recommendation be that it be included on the annual town meeting warrant in June. It's January. I think we have time to do that. But we'd have to get right on this map issue if we're gonna include the map with the thing, because that has to come before the public hearings and it's 45 days back from the vote. So that's like it's the second week in June, so essentially end of May, when you have it ready for, well, the beginning of May, for
End of April.
the end of April,
Oh,
basically.
is if you, to do the planning or hearings and stuff. like
Yeah,
that.
well, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Um,
So, and technically, the planning board should probably hold the public hearing on it at their meeting in April. At our meeting.
and
the
you
third
want,
week in April.
my guess is you want to do some kind of workshop, public workshop on district boundaries
Before,
and any uses. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to just say like, hey, what changes do you want to the, but what changes do you want to shoreline zoning? But
Right.
at least we can say, what uses maybe are appropriate in village center and where should the boundaries of that be?
Yeah.
I think that definitely you want public input on, because
Yeah.
anytime you're moving boundaries and dealing with uses.
I'm not saying make big changes at all. I mean,
Yeah.
I think what you've done is actually brought it into alignment pretty close.
That was the goal, so.
But we need to show that, I guess is what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
So I think we'd have to have that map. We'd have to. The April planning board meeting would be, we wouldn't be able to make changes after that.
That would be the public hearing. Is that
That'd
what
be the
you're saying?
public hearing on the final proposed changes before it goes to town meeting. So that means that we need to have
A workshop.
a workshop with the public about it,
End of February, early March, basically.
yeah, March. Assuming that whoever we get to do the map can then take the input from that meeting and provide us a new map for the final draft for April.
That's. Yeah, right. That's what making maps is not the most difficult thing. I just need someone to do it.
Right.
I don't have the software, but if we want a nice looking map, we should have someone.
We've used Rumline in the past.
Yeah.
It's great.
He's great. That makes sense to me. If that's what you want to do, I will check with Kevin, and I'm sure he's gonna want to run it by the select board, and but we can start the balls rolling on that, assuming they don't say. But we can try.
I mean, I'd like to work towards that. What do you guys think? Any reason not? It means that we have to have something next month. So if there's any other changes, we can propose them then.
Potential changes to the code.
Mhm.
I think the only other. Okay. Mineral extraction we can talk about that when we, agriculture and the.
No, your reasoning is perfect.
Uh,
Why are we gonna allow mineral extraction?
Yeah,
And
they're just,
That's ridiculous.
there's some minor things in there, government institutions,
Yeah.
seasonal conversions. Note 4 is about what I was saying, with the 75-foot setback in stream protection, so. One of the changes is the state made some changes, I guess, from, they used to measure. Is it
Floor
net
area.
floor area
Floor
and
area.
building volume, which with pitched roofs and anything else got messy, and they basically just said, just use gross footprint of the building and the height. So I changed it to that. It's easier. I think they made it a little bit more forgiving, but they basically were like, look, you don't need to use trigonometry to figure out what the volume of what the impact is there. I don't think we're going to be addressing this, but I wanted to put it out there. Potential for developing a waterfront management strategy. I think that's just something that can happen. It's kind of would be a much larger version of the conversation we're having about where you want waterfront uses and things like that.
And that's also probably an appropriate conversation to have with our neighbor across the bridge.
Yes. I mean, that's what
They're doing.
kind of doing right
They're
now.
starting.
So yeah.
That's what they're starting.
So that was just a note in there that I thought was interesting, and I wanted to bring it up with you. The last thing that I think actually would be changes that could be more significant, it wouldn't change the regulation, but the language around non-conforming structures is kind of confusing, because what it says is you're not allowed to build within 100 feet unless X or Y, and if this, and so they basically set it up and then like back off in a lot of ways. And it's like, well, why don't you just tell me what I'm allowed to do within 25 feet, what I'm allowed to do within 50 feet, what I'm allowed to do within 100 feet, and then we can just, so if you find that to be confusing, I can try and untangle it, but
It sounds like you want to.
I mean, I also have a problem where I like to create work myself, so the language that's in here is what it is in Damascata and most municipalities across the state. It is, I think, needlessly confusing, but we can leave it, we can not. It's kind of like choose your battles, I think. And I just put that out there for you all, if that's something that you want. If you've noticed that, if you want to deal with it.
I mean, I like the idea, but you're not wrong about making work. But every time it comes up, it's a question and a conversation about how's it work? And so
I can try. Maybe
no,
you want to leave that as like if I can
Let's-
get it done.
let's say if in the course of doing the rest of it, it becomes apparent that it needs to be done,
Mhm.
do it.
Oh, I think
Otherwise, don't.
prioritizing getting this forward and dealing with the map and everything else
Is more
is more
important.
important. And if I can,
Yeah.
okay, so I will make that
There's one change I do want to talk about real
Okay.
quick, and I know we're coming up here on 8. And that's about hazard trees. It's on page 46 of the draft. And it really only has to do with the very first sentence. It says, hazard trees in the shoreline zone may be removed without a permit after consultation with the code enforcement officer if the following requirements are met. So there's no comma there anywhere. And in plain English, that could be construed as, hey, George, I got some down trees. Okay, take them. Hazard trees, in my opinion and experience, is the excuse people who want better views use to get better views. So I would prefer it if the language said something like, hazard trees in the shoreland zone may only be removed without a permit, comma, after consulting with the code enforcement officer, comma, and only if the following requirements are met. Meaning, you don't need a permit, but you absolutely have to have the code enforcement officer consult with you. And I'd even prefer a site visit be in there as well. Because if you read the rest of these requirements, there's no way A, B, C, D, and E on that page that you or I or anyone would be able to reasonably evaluate these criteria and determine on our own that we don't need a permit. And then call George and say, hey, I don't need a permit.
And have George understand and say, yes, you're right, you don't.
George actually has to go.
So
He
why,
has to evaluate A, B, C, D, and E. He has to in my opinion, provide some written explanation for why you don't need a permit.
So why don't you just require a permit?
And then only after that,
Hmm.
you don't have, because you don't have to pay. The whole idea is it's a payment.
Well, we could always just,
How much is the fee?
I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean,
There is no fee.
Probably relatively minimal.
then you said you have to pay.
Well, no, I mean, we're saying that you don't have to have a permit, but the reason for that is because A, you should be allowed to take down storm, damaged trees.
But you have to
On your
do
own.
all of this
So you
stuff
gotta
to
do all that
establish that
stuff.
that sounds like, what do you?
Yeah.
There's
I'm
no
saying-
written record that this assessment has been made,
Right.
but it has to have been made. Well, George has to be consulted. He has to agree that all of this criteria is met. Seems like and then he just has to remember.
There is, I
And
think
once the
it's,
tree's down, there's no proof there was an issue.
That's
Right.
exactly right.
Yeah.
That is exactly the problem.
and I think there is somewhere in here, I think it's actually for tree harvesting, but like you can do a thing as long as you submit a letter to the town saying that you're doing it. You basically have to notify the town. And what I'm wondering is if maybe we can say like, as long as you submit these things and basically get approval. I'm just trying to think of like,
Yeah, so
how to
it's
do a
like, you
approval
don't have to
like,
get approval as long as you get approval.
right.
But we're not going to document it because that would be a permit and we don't want to have a permit. It's like, why are we avoiding the permit? Is there a lot involved in getting a permit? A lot more than meeting all of these criteria?
I don't think so.
I mean, so this is the state language.
Yeah.
It's just a copy and paste from chapter
Yeah.
1000.
It's the
That's it.
that's the bit we didn't put in.
Right. So we actually have the ability to be more restrictive, which is what I'm actually
Only
proposing.
if we don't adopt the state.
No. This
Right.
is outside. This isn't about timber harvesting at all.
Okay.
This is
Right.
just about hazard trees, storm damaged trees, and dead trees. That's it. So I guess what I am proposing is that we make this language somehow a lot more strict than it is right now, and require some type of process.
But the documentation of which is not a permit, it's some other
Well,
thing.
But it could be, I mean,
Maybe it's
we
a
could make it
permit without a
permit,
fee.
right?
Whatever.
Right, right. I mean, I don't know that permit necessarily is equal to. Is there any permit that doesn't require a fee currently? I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are, and we could make them too. What I'm just wondering is this may be kind of like a issue with this isn't a land use, but they regulate. So like for taking down hazard trees, I imagine would be the permit that you would need is clearing or removal of vegetation for activities other than timber harvesting. So I think the point is that you don't have to get that permit if what you're doing is taking down a hazard tree, but you do have to jump through all of the hoops.
It's just not very clear.
Which is-
Even if you read I'm just going to read C. Okay. The removal of standing dead trees resulting from natural causes is permissible without the need for replanting or a permit, as long as the removal does not result in the creation of new lawn areas or other permanently cleared areas, and stumps are not removed. For the purposes of this provision, dead trees are those trees that contain no foliage during the growing season.
I mean, dead trees?
Who makes that and how? It's a completely unenforceable thing. It's a loophole that if we're serious, then it should be closed. I understand that it's putting more restrictions on how people do things and they're not going to like it, but I've seen this abused specifically more times. And then once it's gone forever. And you can't prove that it wasn't there. So, yeah, I'd like to propose that we close the loophole somehow.
I wrote down here to tighten language around hazard trees. I can take a stab at it.
Or
And you're
Steve-
welcome to send me anything you want also.
I mean, let's not reinvent the wheel. If anybody else has done it,
right.
let's find out and see what they got. You don't like the idea of it?
Yeah, I'm thinking about something else,
Okay.
just from my experience in certain things. Working as a utility arborist and dealing with CMP,
Mm-hmm.
there are lines that run in shoreline zoning,
Yes.
and there's trees near them,
Yes.
and a lot of them are hazard trees.
Yep.
That get cut down.
Yep.
By either Asplund or CMP determines that their forester determines, oh, this is a hazard tree, go cut that down.
Right.
That's not, so
Well, we
they don't go to the town and say, hey, we got
Right.
20 trees here.
Right.
Here, here. I need a permit for one of these trees, because certain towns
Right.
that have tree wardens and town arborists,
Right.
and every tree that's in a special area has a tag on it and a barcode, and like how,
Could we just make an exception? Because if I understand it correctly, like if you've got, like we do, some places where the utility line goes out across the water or something, you know what I mean? The setback or the piece of land at which the contractor can operate is only like, 8 feet to either side or something like that. There's a certain number. They're
Yeah,
not
8
allowed to just go take trees.
8 feet
willy-nilly.
either side
Is it 8 feet? either
of,
side
yeah,
Of the utility
yes.
pole or line or vertical plane of the whatever.
8 feet to either side, 15 feet above, and anything underneath the line.
So, I mean, I'm suggesting we close the loophole for, residents.
Yeah, but-
And we make an exception for utility.
The thing that brought up is through different things. I've been out on
Yeah.
trimming on a section line. Someone's like, hey, this tree here.
Yeah.
It's doesn't look too good. Do you think you could take that out? And then we like, oh well,
Yeah.
let's look into this. And then we talk to the town tree warden, like, oh no, that tree can't come.
Right, right.
It's in a special zone or whatever.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there are people that try to get trees cut
Yes,
because they find that as a loophole in order to get stuff done.
right.
So that was just something that just had popped into my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's just talking about, it doesn't necessarily feel exactly what we're talking about. But
Well,
just something
no,
that
I mean,
thought about.
It's a really good point because we don't have those things and we're not gonna have a
Mhm.
tree warden or anything
Yeah.
like that. But if we could make our standards align with common practice, like we do with the roads, driveways, and entrances ordinance, aligns with the common practices of the published DOT manual.
Mhm.
If we just follow those same guidelines in our code, then we at least got legal recourse when and if what you just described happens.
Mhm.
We can go to the landowner and say, hey, you may have thought you had a loophole by having them cut this tree down that's 20 feet outside of that 8 foot, whatever, because you called it a dead tree, but we've got it. Here's the standard, right?
I'm also thinking like you mentioned you have a forester who basically says, yeah, like these are the trees to come down. Like there might be, one of the things in here was that says like the code enforcement officer may require property owner to submit an evaluation from a licensed forester or arborist, which like if there's a like, if you have a licensed forester on your staff that's determining which trees to come down, then at least it's not, Joe from next door that's determining, yeah, this tree's bad. That yes, like they can abuse that and be like, oh, well, Joe said that it's a bad tree and fine, we can take it down, but there's at least another layer there of like someone who's supposed to be responsible and technically who's licensed, I would imagine is online if this is really bad. So I don't know, maybe there's something there that we can also use, because I think that the point of we don't want to be interfering with, we don't want to make, people who are managing utility lines and easements and things, we don't want to make their lives harder.
No.
But we also just don't want, people to be taking down trees because they want a nice view that shouldn't be taken down.
I mean, the problem is that like this has only been enforced on the most egregious violations
Mhm.
because of this language is so loose. So years back, there was the, you know, the resident in South Bristol who just got chainsaw happy. You guys remember that at all? And it was so egregious that, you know, they fined him. I don't even remember. It was a huge fine. Made him plant it all back, do shoreline reparations, all kinds of stuff. But, you know, short of that level, it doesn't really get addressed or enforced.
Mhm.
And I don't like feeling like someone who, A, I'm on the planning board. It's not my job to enforce these things, but just because I'm on the planning board, happen to know what the regulations are, when I show up at someone's property and realize, oh, now I'm in a pickle.
Mhm.
What do I do? And it's not just me, it could be any one of us. We know the regulation and you go to a place, you realize they've violated the ordinance. You are technically duty bound to report it. But who wants to be a tattletale? So you don't. It's your neighbor or not, or your friend. I mean, it just gets really ugly. So
Yeah.
we need to put stronger.
Let's like clear standards are your
Absolutely.
friend, because then it's like, or were you allowed to do this? Should you have done that? No, yes, you know, there's no gray areas. You can get rid of them.
Number of conversations I've been standing on someone's deck. Oh, these were all dead trees. Don't I have a great view now? I can't even tell you how many times.
Poison soil, I guess. Should address that.
All right, well, I've got that. I will try and clarify and tighten that.
Yeah, I'm sorry to make such a deal out of it. It's just something that's annoyed me over the years.
No, I'm sure that's not the only gray area in here, I'm sure. I think that's everything that's in here that I have anyway.
Well, it's a ton of work. Thank you very much for doing it. It really needs to be done.
Yeah, happy to do it. It's at the very least, it's going to make my life easier having a complete ordinance. So, but hopefully, it also is better for the town and
Yeah.
everybody else.
All right, so we good on that, Caroline? Draft amendment so far? We'll see more. Any public comment? No public comment? Planners report?
The only thing, and it's LD 2003. I was talking with Kevin. He went and asked MMA for some legal guidance about density because we don't regulate density.
Mhm.
But
Let me guess, their answer was different.
their answer was kind of we do. And so there are some things that I think we can change. We may want to change depending on how this works. Because if the argument can be made that you can get this 2.5 time density bonus, there are properties that have a minimum 20-foot frontage, basically lot width, and a maximum of 40 units allowed in a building. I mean, it'd be hard to get a 40-unit building in a 20-foot wide lot, but there is a density there that I guess you could kind of determine, and that would put it at 100 units because it's 2.5 times 40. So there'd be a lot of units on a relatively small lot, and you know that seems kind of nuts to me. So there are I'm just want to put it out there because we got to deal with this basically by town meeting as well.
Unless the legislature picks it again, which
Yeah.
they will.
You think so?
Well, no one else is going to be ready.
Well, it's in
I mean,
it's
there'll
in
be-
effect for the towns that have councils. Which,
There'll be a dozen towns in Maine that are actually ready.
Yeah.
That's it. And it'll be all the big ones. And that's it.
so that is there. There's a number of ways that we could deal with it. Some of them are really like gaming the system. Some of them are just like, yeah, well, if we go harder to the lean into the form-based code a bit more and say, you don't put a limit on the number of units, you put a limit on the number of the building mass. Like the example of, I think it was in the D6 district where it's 20-foot maximum lot width and 40 unit maximum number of units. If you look at that building, like the total footprint of a building that you're allowed to have there, if you were to actually max out that 100 units, they would be like 218 square foot. So they'd be pretty tiny. And so the next question that I have for Kevin to go back to MMA for is basically say, like, let's say we didn't regulate the number of units, but we did say you have a minimum unit size and you have a maximum building floor area. Does that now count as regulating density? And
See,
I'm
MMA
just-
are the wrong people to ask this question.
Yeah.
Because they're going to push us in the direction of, you need to tell us how much per acre. Whatever the unit is. That's what they're going to insist on.
Well, they quoted some language, and I can share it with you that I was like, okay, that's this makes sense. That's a little maybe it's like we don't regulate density directly. It's like a hop or two away. But okay, if you're going to make that argument, really the reason this is important is we don't want to end up in like legal hot water if we reject something and then someone makes this argument and a judge is like, yeah, it's a reasonable argument. You should have allowed it.
Absolutely. I don't disagree
So
with that at all. We
that's
need to
why it's-
protect the town. I understand that, but we also have an obligation to push back on unreasonable laws and regulations.
Yeah.
So
So I bring it up. I don't think we're going to solve it, but I wanted to mention it. I will share the language with you that the response we got back from MMA. And we can kind of determine what changes, if any, how to change, how reasonable the arguments are.
if you get a chance, I mean, in all your other work or whatever, if you get a chance to just do a summary memo,
Sure.
just, because I'm sorry, I know that I assume that we all know exactly what we're talking about, and I apologize because I've been involved with LD 2003 from the beginning. So I get a little passionate about it. And you all may not be as
We're
interested as
not
me.
all as versed as you, believe it or not.
On LD 2003.
in most of anything.
Well, that's probably a good thing, guys, honestly. But yeah,
I think
it'd probably be good to just have it
yeah,
summarized so that we can discuss it.
I think I put something together for Kevin. I don't know if it was actually, I can't remember if it was a memo for the select board or it was just for Kevin. But I will kind of clean that up and give that to you. And
That'd be great. Yeah. And just because,
oh, the only other thing I was going to say is in MMA's response was basically like, if you have form-based code, this requirement does not apply to you, but it can't be a mostly form-based code. It has to be, and this now I'm paraphrasing, it has to be form-based code where you don't regulate density. And they were saying the frontage, yeah, you don't regulate lot area, but if you're regulating frontage, then it's like you could figure out what the theoretical maximum number of units per lot could be, and not for that specific lot, but just for a lot. So for that, I'm like, that's an argument.
I'm not sure I buy that.
Well, I'll send you this and you
Yeah.
read it and you let me know what you think, but that conversation is coming. So
Great.
probably next meeting.
I'm excited.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you. Any other public comment about anything else? Then without objection, I will adjourn the meeting. The time is 8:15. No objections? Meeting adjourned.